Podcast hosts are always wondering, how can I find more listeners for my podcast? And to help build their audiences, a lot of hosts turn to Instagram. The problem is that a lot of advice I see around marketing your podcast on Instagram is either outdated, ineffective, or both. And that's why today I'm going to teach you how to grow your podcast on Instagram, including some do's and don'ts regardless of your current audience size. Hey everyone, I'm Melissa, and welcome back to Wit and Wire, where we help creators turn their skills and passions into profitable online businesses. Instagram is one of the top social media platforms that podcasters use to both market their episodes and engage with listeners. But in an age of very rapid updates from Instagram and new feature releases, it can be tough to know what's working and what's as outdated as Gen Z thinks that this emoji is. I will still use it. I don't care. But before we talk about posting strategies, I think it's important for us to start with your overall Instagram presence, beginning with this question I get all the time. Do I need a dedicated Instagram handle for my podcast? I think this comes down to whether or not you would have two accounts talking to the same audience. So let's say you have a personal account and you're wondering about starting a new account for your podcast, but it's about something totally different. It's about your love of food and not about your travel photos and your pictures with friends. In that case, I think a new account makes sense. If you're a business owner though, like me at Wit and Wire, I only have one account at Wit and Wire for my entire business, and I talk about the podcast within that account because if I had created two separate accounts, they would have both been talking about the same exact thing, online business and podcasting strategies, to the exact same audience. So I would have been dividing my efforts, and I think it would have felt like I was doing double the work for not double the outcome. And in fact, I think the same people would follow me on both. So that's my pro tip. If you're talking to the same audience about the same topic, I recommend keeping it to one account. And if you want, you could still have the handle for the podcast, maybe put up 3 to 6 posts so that it's not blank so that people can click and use that link in the bio of the second account. And that way you can kind of own it. But for the most part, I think we would all prefer to have only one Instagram account for all the things. Once you've decided if you're using one account or creating a new account, it's time for us to get into our Instagram marketing strategies. And to start, I want to talk about content, and I actually want to begin with a mistake. I see a lot of podcast hosts sharing what I call billboard posts. A billboard post is anything where the whole premise of the graphic or the video and the caption is all about listening to your episode. So here's one from Wit and Wire's past account. You can see it's promoting an episode, and then even the caption does get a little bit into sharing a tip, but a lot of this is just about the episode, not about value. That's the reframe on your content strategy that, if nothing else from this video, I hope you take this away. The whole goal of Instagram is to create value within Instagram. You shouldn't have to force somebody to leave the platform and listen to your episode to learn something from you or feel entertained. So my first strategy for podcast hosts is to make sure that every single thing you post on Instagram is valuable as a standalone piece of content. Here are some examples of what not to do. Do not just tell people you have a new episode. Do not just give people a link to said episode. Instead, what you'll do is share something like a quote from the episode, one of your favorite tips from the episode, or a main takeaway, or maybe even a spotlight on the guest. What you want to do is create value, so much so that people say, wow, I already learned so much from this post that now I'm so excited to listen to the full episode. Now, of course, at the end of the caption, you definitely should include a link to the episode or a mention that you have a podcast and where people can find you. But overall, you want to create content that is valuable, not just talk about your podcast episodes. You can also go beyond the podcast episode itself. That's the second strategy, is to expand beyond your episode content and keep talking about other bonus tips that you didn't cover in the episode, or maybe bring people behind the scenes. Instagram is all about connecting with other people, and that's why I think it can be helpful to go beyond your standard episode content. Now, on top of that, I will say that a third strategy I recommend is going back in the archives and using tips or information from previous episodes to add to your content strategy. Think about how much value you share in just one podcast episode. It's far more than you could cover in just one Instagram post. And for most of us, our podcast episodes are evergreen, which means that the content will still be good months or even years from now. So although it's great to promote your newest episodes, definitely don't hesitate to go back to the archive and to revisit tips and strategies from previous episodes to continue engaging listeners who now already know about you. Because remember, they may have found you after that episode was released, so they've maybe never heard about it before. And even if they've been following you for a long time, it often takes people a few times to hear about something for the message to sink in, so I definitely wouldn't worry about being redundant. Continuing with our theme of content creation, our fourth strategy is to create Audiograms, but these are not your 2019 Audiograms. Back in the day, people used to post feed videos, but right now it's very obvious that Reels and even Instagram stories are getting more engagement than standard in-feed videos. So if you want to use an audiogram, it looks like this. You can see that there's maybe a graphic, there is a moving waveform on the screen, and I would strongly recommend including captions, not only for accessibility reasons, which is huge, but also because a lot of people are scrolling through Instagram with no audio. So if you put the words on a screen, it's more accessible in many ways. An audiogram is typically a 15 to 60 second clip from the episode, and I think it could be really interesting to start sharing those as reels. It's not a strategy I see a lot of hosts creating yet, but I think if you can really understand reel culture, but also use clips from your podcast episode, then there could be some magic there. Beyond that, obvious as it sounds, I have to include tip number 5, use reels. Reels are the obvious darling of Instagram, and although engagement is increasing, more people are creating reels, it is definitely still a great strategy to incorporate them into your content creation plans. Although strategy number 4 talked about audiograms, I think the far more popular use for reels for podcast hosts is to create Instagram-specific content that is related to an episode. So let's say I did a podcast episode on some of my favorite email marketing strategies. I could share just one of those strategies in a reel, and then I could say, check the link in my bio for the full episode and 4 more great strategies on email marketing. So you can take out one tip, or you could find other fun ways to bring trending reels into your podcast world. The possibilities are endless. This is not a Reels tutorial, but I would definitely recommend thinking about ways that you can use Reels for your podcast promotion. On that note, a common question is, how often should I post to each different part of Instagram? And that's why my 6th tip is to commit to a realistic posting strategy. Instagram experts recommend posting to stories daily. They recommend posting to the feed 3 to 5 times per week, and they recommend posting reels 4 to 7 times per week. Now, let me tell you, ain't nobody got time for that. There is no way that I have time for all of that content on Instagram, and I have always believed in a quality over quantity approach. So although yes, your odds of increasing your follower count and engagement will go up the more you engage with Instagram, I firmly believe in choosing a strategy that works for you. When I started posting on Instagram, I was only doing 1 post per week, and then I upped it to 2. Right now, that is my absolute peak. 2 posts per week is like a heyday for me. Most of the time, I'm doing 1 thing on Instagram per week, and lately it's been 1 reel per week because that's what's been working for my account at Wit and Wire. But I definitely recommend choosing a strategy that is doable for you, and even preparing in batches if that's helpful. Batch working means you sit down and you prep 4 reels in one day or 4 posts in one day. And I think that that is huge, not only because you get in the flow and you are more productive, but also because it helps you zoom out and think big picture about your strategy. And as podcast hosts, we already have a calendar of our upcoming episodes. So your Instagram strategy can mirror your podcast episode release schedule. Next up, we have to talk about how to use the link in bio. So famously, everyone on Instagram always says, check the link in bio, right? Whether it's stories, reels, captions, it's everywhere. And as a podcast host, what I want to caution you against is putting a direct link to your podcast in Apple in your bio. The reason why is because not everybody has an iPhone, but even within the iPhone users, not everyone is using Apple Podcasts. Spotify has gained a lot of popularity in the podcast industry in the last few years, and even Google Podcasts, some people enjoy, and especially Android users, that's their default platform. So within your Instagram bio, I recommend either linking to a single landing page, like if you visit witandwire.com/podcast, you'll see that's a page on my WordPress site, and right near the top, I have links to Apple, Spotify, and Google so people can choose where they want to listen. Or some people like to go with a different approach. I use a tool called link.bio to create a landing page with multiple links to my different podcast platforms and maybe a spotlight episode. But I will say that I don't have the time or energy to update that every week to the latest episode. So I'm just directing people to the link in bio, and then I'm assuming that because they're seeing a post on my Instagram the week an episode goes live, they'll be able to find it. Now, if you're using the strategy I mentioned previously about sharing tips from previous episodes, then it may make more sense for you to tell people how to find those episodes. For me, the best way is that when people go to witandwire.com/podcast, that page on my WordPress site has a search bar. So I can direct people there and they can search for something like email marketing and find that episode. The next strategy is exciting because this was a feature Instagram teased for a long time, and that is how podcasters can use the new link in bio sticker in stories to promote your podcast. I think the obvious way to use that sticker would be to drive people to your latest episode. But again, you don't want to send them directly to Apple because not everyone is an Apple Podcasts user. So there's a free tool I like called Podfollow. And what Podfollow does is if somebody clicks on a Podfollow link, if they're on an Apple device, they'll go to Apple Podcasts. If they're on an Android device, they might go to Google. And if they're on a desktop, they may go to your website. You have full control over those different options, but that automatically routes people to your podcast in different places based on the device that you're using. The other strategy that you can use is to send people to the show notes on your website. So for example, if you go to witandwire.com/40, you'll go to an episode on my website that has an embedded player and links to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google. And that episode happens to be about how I doubled my downloads between season 1 and season 2. So if I were to create an Instagram story about that episode, I would use the link sticker to send people to the WordPress show notes post. And then within that post, right near the top, I would make it super easy to access it in Apple, Spotify, and Google. Now, thinking a little bit bigger, I wouldn't only use the link sticker to promote your podcast episodes. As a podcast host, it is important for me to remember my overall mission, and the reason why I have a podcast is to share the word about my business and to build my audience for my online courses. And the way that I typically sell courses is through my email list. So I would also encourage you to use those stickers to share downloadable freebies, to talk about your products and services and maybe link to things like a free discovery call, or to consider other ways that you could build community. So maybe you have a free Facebook group or another way that you connect with people. If you are a host who uses something like Patreon or you collect donations, there are so many ways that you can use that new link sticker on Instagram. But to circle back to my earlier tip, I would always make sure that your story is about more than just clicking the link. Make sure you're sharing value, and then the link happens to be the natural next step. So if it's a tip, maybe booking a discovery call with you is the next natural step to dive deeper. Or maybe listening to your episode is the next natural step to hear the other 4 tips. So keep that in mind. It is the number one takeaway from this whole video. Always lead with value, not just an action you want them to take. By the way, as a quick aside, since I mentioned email marketing, that is the number one channel that I use to promote my online courses at Wit and Wire. So if you're interested in learning more about email marketing strategies, leave a comment below this video and let me know what questions you would have. And if I get enough interest, I will make a new video. Up until this point, all of the strategies have been around content creation. And these next 2 tips will take things to the next level by introducing partnerships and collaboration. So our next tip is to share your interviews via stories so that guests can repost them. For years, I was creating custom graphics for my guests and I was sharing them via email and hoping that they would promote their episodes. And yes, some of them do use those graphics, but what I found worked far better and was way easier for everyone was that I would create a story, usually a series of stories with maybe my favorite quote from the episode or something that really shows off the guest, and I would tag the guest in those posts. And then because it was within stories, which are very ephemeral, they're not part of the feed, it was so easy for guests to just reshare the story that they had been tagged in. And my best tip is to really show off your guest. So even if it's just an image of the episode or it's an audiogram, a little quote from the episode, what I would recommend is highlighting your guest, saying something really nice about them, because that's going to make them more likely to reshare it to their stories if they look amazing. And nowadays you can include a link sticker in your own story. So I'm not sure if that will be clickable if a guest reshares it, probably not. So maybe you would advise them to include a link to their episode within their reshare. The next strategy is one I'm really excited about, and that is to use the Collabs feature on Instagram. Collabs is a new feature on Instagram where 2 accounts can work together on a joint post that will appear on both of your feeds. It could be that one of you creates it, and just by inviting the other person to the post, both of your names will appear at the top. So previously where you just saw at Wit and Wire and then you would see my own post, now there are 2 handles at the top and it's associated with both of your accounts. This is great news for both of you because it means that the post is reaching both of your audiences, which should elevate both of your businesses and help you both grow. As podcasters, I think we are perfectly situated for this feature, particularly if you interview guests, because you could work on a collab post together and it'll show up on both of your feeds. I will say that the downside or the challenge is that it may not be on brand for both feeds, but something that I think could be really interesting is that if collabs work on Reels, then you could be in a collab and it could be a clip from the episode if it was previously recorded. It could also be something recorded separately. I think even beyond interviewing guests, If you have a community, using collabs can be an incredible way to partner with your community and really elevate both of you and to show that you're giving back and that you're engaging. It's been a big trend this year, and I know it'll only continue, where people want to interact with their favorite podcasters and online creators. And I think collabs is something to keep an eye on for sure. And I would definitely recommend getting in on those early to see how they work for you. My next strategy is about content creation, but it's really about productivity. And the tip is to save posts and save audio for inspiration. Starting from a blank page or a blank Instagram post is my least favorite thing to do. So whenever I'm scrolling through Instagram, if I find a tip that I think is great, I'll save the post. If I see a style or a type of content that somebody else created, I'll save the post. And I actually put them all in a folder because you can organize things by folder in the Instagram app. And although I would never suggest that you copy someone else's content, and I never copy anyone else's content, the things that they talk about, I think are fair game. Like, for example, so many people talk about launching a podcast. I can't claim that as mine, but the way I talk about it and the way I style my content around it, whether it's a post or a reel or a story, that's all mine. So that's what I'm talking about when I say save posts as inspiration. So whether it's the topic itself or the style, the way that they've shared it, I always save content because you'll forget about it later. Our brains forget everything, so I have to save it. Then the other element of saving is saving audio for trending reels. You can see if audio is trending because there's a small arrow next to the audio name. So anytime you're listening to reels and you hear a sound that you like that you think you could apply to your own promotion, I would recommend saving it. And that way you can sit down and plan out your content for 1 to 4 weeks, depending on how you like to work. But it's just nice that you already have a starting point instead of wondering, what am I going to post this month? The next strategy to grow your podcast on Instagram is to use hashtags. And I recommend a tool called Flick. I will leave a link in the description, but you can use Flick to not only find the right hashtags for your audience, but also track their effectiveness and analytics to see which of your posts are actually trending because of those hashtags. I know there's been a lot of conflicting advice lately around how many hashtags to use, from 3 to 5 all the way up to all 30, but I always follow Flick's guidance since this is what they do as a business. Fully, they are all about hashtags, and they still recommend using all 30 and putting it in the caption, not in the comments. So as of the time of this recording, that's what I do, and I would recommend that for you as well. Hopefully, once you start implementing some of these strategies and sharing real value on Instagram, you will see your engagement, comments, likes, saves, DMs, and followers go up. I do just want to share that although followers I think matter in some cases, overall I believe it is a vanity metric. I would much rather have 2,000 Instagram followers who are super engaged, listen to my podcast, and buy my courses than 10,000 followers or 100,000 followers, and I still only get 29 likes on a post. It just doesn't make sense. So when it comes to followers, maybe a mindset shift is that it's not about having a big audience, it's about having the right audience. So if you are putting out valuable content, if you are actually engaging with other accounts, you're following people, you're leaving them comments and likes, and you're being a real human who is engaging in an actual social media network, emphasis on social, that's how I think you're really going to find success on Instagram. So instead of asking yourself, how can I reach as many people as possible? Think about how can I form quality connections with the right people. Also, Instagram will always change. As a business, they're evolving. As an algorithm-based platform, that algorithm is always evolving. So what won't change is their intention. Their goal is to keep people in their app. And the way they can do that is by having creators share valuable, engaging content. So if that's what you focus on, Instagram will always prioritize you to the best of their abilities. The other side of that is that it is often helpful to embrace change. So instead of resisting Instagram's newest features, it is helpful to keep an eye on what they're talking about, their new releases, and to test them out. You don't have to use all of them indefinitely because, wow, they have a lot of features now. But overall, Instagram will always prefer when people are utilizing their platform to its full potential. So trying the new features is always a good option. Now, if you are thinking about launching your own podcast, but you aren't sure which equipment to choose or where to start, you can download our free podcast launch checklist at witandwire.com/checklist, or you'll find a link in the video description. If you found these tips helpful, I hope you'll give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel before you go. And in the comments, I'd love to know, what was your favorite tip that you learned in today's lesson? Or what is something that surprised you about building your audience on Instagram? Thanks again for tuning into today's Wit and Wire video. And here is the next video I would recommend for you.